Hello, our Sacred Journey friends. This is Joan and Gail's here.
Hey everyone.
Well, we are at our last chapter of this book. It's really quite unbelievable. We've done this whole thing virtually, and here we've talked about practices of disengagement and now all these practices of engagement, and we are at the final one. So we're excited to bring this audio to you today for April 16th through the 22nd. Is when you'll be working on this, and you'll meet in your groups sometime around the 22nd. And then just a reminder, you should be getting an email about this too. April 29th is our final class, and we're doing a large group Zoom for whoever can join us on that Thursday morning, 9:30 to 11, just to really name and notice where God was at work in our groups and us personally. We'll give you some time in your small groups to share. We'll certainly start with a way of slowing and a piece of scripture, and just fun for us to actually look around the screen and recognize all the other people that have been involved in this, all the other groups that have been meeting like yours. And so please mark that on your calendar. You'll get more info on the link for the Zoom on that coming shortly. So that's really kind of all of our announcements. But usually at this time, we talk about a little bit about listening and generally a little bit about our covenant. And we feel like, Gail and I feel like we've really hit on a lot of different pieces of it. And this week I ran back into a quote by Henry Nouwen that Gail and I just both really loved. And I just want to read it to you. And you might have to stop and rewind this and listen to it a second time. There's a lot here, but I think it's an encouragement of what has happened in your groups, but it's also a challenge for us going into these last few weeks. So once again, this is by Henry Nouwen. He actually named this listening as servanthood, which I think is quite fascinating as well. He says, listening is much more than allowing another to talk while waiting for a chance to respond. Listening is paying full attention to others and welcoming them into our very beings. The beauty of listening is that those who are listened to start feeling accepted, start taking their words more seriously, and discovering their own true selves. Listening is a form of spiritual hospitality by which you invite strangers to become friends, to get to know their inner selves more fully, and even to dare to be silent with you. And I just, like I said, I'm encouraged by that, and I'm challenged by that. And listening is a lifelong skill. And I'm just grateful that we've had this opportunity to be in our groups and practice that.
I love the picture that he paints of listening being a part of hospitality.
Mhm.
Deep listening creates a hospitable space for people to come and be safe and seen. I love that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, just like even thinking of your table at your dining room table, what if we just, that was our listening? We're inviting somebody to, to dinner, but we're listening. So,
Yeah. And that's what we hope all of us have experienced this year, even as we've met in our small groups. It's pretty awesome. Well, everyone, we have a delightful surprise for all of you today. We have a special guest who has joined us and is joining us in our conversation. And let me just tell you how we got here. Joan and I were talking about this last chapter, which is titled Making Our Pilgrimage to Heaven, where Keith encourages each of us to name those people in our life who saints and mentors that have influenced our spiritual journeys as we travel towards heaven. And in one accord, Joan and I both named Sybil Towner. And so Sybil has agreed to join us this time. So welcome, Sybil.
Oh, thank you. What a beautiful gift to be named, to just receive the gift of acceptance and of joy from just even hearing you say that, Gail.
Oh, well, it is our great joy. And in fact, we can't really say your name very often without a big smile coming across our face because you are so near and dear to us. And as Joan and I both said to each other, we know that we're one of your dearest, dearest friends. In fact, we are family.
We are.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Oh, you are.
Her only friends, Gail.
Yes, her
Okay.
only
Yes.
friends. Of course,
Well,
there's about another 1,000 of us that are all
yeah,
saying the same
but
thing.
but
Yeah,
your pictures are in our home up.
that is
I
true.
That is true. So we are so grateful. But for those of you who have never had this delightful chance to meet Sybil, you're getting to meet her via audio today. Let me just tell them a little bit about you, Sybil. And of course, you can correct it at the end if you need to. But Sybil and I met, oh gosh, 30 years ago when she and her husband Dick moved up here from Ohio to Chicago, where Dick was on staff at Willow. And for the next 20 years, Sybil served, I think, every ministry in the church, behind the scenes, teaching, meeting and gathering leaders to teach them and mentor them in so many different places that her fingerprints are all over our church, and so our Dicks, and then she also helped to co-found Listen to My Life, which many of you may be familiar with, a curriculum and actually a ministry that serves people to really take note of their story and see where God is in their story. And then she's also served with Transforming Center for any of you who have participated in that as a spiritual director, and I believe teaching some. And right now, 10 years ago, she left the Chicago area with Dick to found, I guess, you're co-founder of The Springs, which is a Christian retreat center that ministers to people in ministry, leaders in ministry that need a place to be refreshed and restored. And we have maintained a beautiful relationship with Sybil, and she has been our mentor. And in this chapter, he asks us to find those people that have gone ahead of us or mentored us along in our journey. And I know that Joan and I would full-heartedly say, Sybil, that you have done that for us, and in your friendship, but also in your wisdom and your intentionality to walk this pilgrimage with purpose and move towards really finding yourself going to heaven, right? So to start, I want to read the quote that Dallas Willard, that was at the beginning of this chapter, and just get your take a little bit on this quote. And the chapter, like I said, is called Making Our Life a Pilgrimage to Heaven. And Dallas says this, he says, Jesus makes it clear that for his followers, there is no experience or taste of death. When you die, it is like passing from one room to another. You might not know you're dead until you see loved ones who you shouldn't be seeing welcoming you. And I'm just curious, as you hear that quote and as you notice the title to our chapter, what comes to mind? What has that been like for you as you've considered that?
Well, there's lots of ways to consider it, but death is a part of life. And most of life, we are letting go of things. And so I live within the order of the church year. Whether a church keeps it or not doesn't really matter to me. But one of the ways I think about life is every ending leads to a beginning. So, so that ending then walks me into a new room. And every year I do the church year calendar, but it's a deeper ring on the tree because I'm 1 year older. I'm 1 year with new challenges and just different joys and pieces of life. And so I walk into a new room. In that year, I don't forget the old room. Some of the colors I take with me are the same. There might be a special photograph that I take with me, but that room I need to leave.
Hmm.
And T.S. Eliot said it this way in Little Gilding. He says, "What we call the beginning is often the end. And to make an end is to make a beginning. And the end is where we start from. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the very first time." It's from
That
the
is powerful.
yeah, that's from the Little Gilding, and I'll send you a picture of it. Um, but so that space, a piece, a model, if you want to call it a mental model that has held me, is that I came from God. I mean, I just live in Psalm 139. He knew me before there was any life for me, and I'm going to God. And so I have this space that Peter talks about and says is a breath. So I take a breath and I say, "Oh man, this is a short period of time." And of course you can say it, but the more years we put on, we say a quote we all say to each other: "Where have the years gone?" Or
Yeah.
when we were mothers of young children, when they went to school, we said, "Oh my gosh, I never thought the nights would end, and now where has this all come to?" So we all feel this slowness of time. Will we ever be over this? And then all of a sudden that we're on a fast track that that we didn't understand. But then the other thing is, how do I live in this breath, this small breath of time? One, to keep discovering that God is God and I am not. It's not just one conversion, it's many conversions. I surrender my life literally every day. I mean, I actually now say those words. It isn't a practice that I did. I said it in another way, but it's MANY conversions, and so I remember that God is God and I am not. And why do I have to remember that? Because I try to play God.
I know.
I,
Me too.
I'm
Yes.
I am tempted to run the show, um, and or try to run the show, and find that that doesn't work as well. He graciously gets me back on track, and we begin again. And the other is loving what God loves. So to love Him, to love others, and love myself, and all of the commandments express that in one way or another. They're the how. And then the last one is, the reason that I am here on this earth is to extend the reign of the kingdom of God. Nothing more, nothing less. So that is really clear to me.
Mm.
And that actually came focused when I turned 50. The way I expressed it in the decades before that was to know Christ and make Him known. That was the expression of my life in mentoring children and families and young men and women. But I had to face the shadow side of myself, and I had to get out of the driver's seat. I wanted God in the car, but I actually wanted to drive it.
That's a great
and
thing.
I wanted him on the property, mind you. I wanted him, but he just said, are you willing to surrender? Because I am who I am, and I know who you are. So that journey from really being broken, and that was my journey in coming, and where I very briefly met you after, discovered again. This was a maxi conversion in the middle of all those mini conversions. Was the question God asked me was, "Do you love me?" And then He said, "Feed my sheep." And And so they're the same words he said to Peter in John 20. And then at the end of that, he said, Peter, when you were younger, you went where you wanted to go. Again, following Christ, he confessed Christ. But now that you are older, I will take you where you do not want to go. And so the death of the ego. So this thing, when you die, my ego had to have a really death knell. It wasn't total, because that will not happen, I don't think, until I go to the other side, but it had a really pretty strong death knell. And one of them relates to my relationship to you two. One of the things that God said to me in this new beginning is, don't do something alone.
Mhm.
And I think, thinking of men and women, but often with women who get into a place of leadership, and this happens with men as well, they don't invite somebody else into that place.
Mm.
And it is such a tragedy that when that does not happen. And so the 50s for me, this space was the crown of blessing.
Mm.
Just share life with those in the next generations. And so,
Wow, that
Wow.
has our experience with you. I was just going to comment on just even as you're talking, I know everybody's listening and realizing, Sybil, that you have entered your relationship with God with intentionality. You have embraced what he has brought towards you with intentionality, and that has played itself out in your life. And because of that, you have become a person who listens extremely well to people and can hear the nudgings and the voice of God as he guides you along this journey. So it's fun to listen to you describe that in that way. But that's something that I have gained from. I'm sure Joan would say the same.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah, I hear in there, Sybil, as you were talking, you living with a capital L life and not just a lowercase l. It's very easy for all of us just to live that lowercase life and go through day to day. But that intentionality that God or Gail talked about has made that a capital L kind of way of living, that heaven has come to earth, and
yes,
that's how you are living. And then I heard this pattern of endings and beginnings and just kind of tripping over one another, and also living, the seasons of the church calendar, which is essentially the seasons of the life of Christ,
yes,
and that all those are a part, of what we are called to live. I think the other thing that came to mind as we were talking earlier before you got on the call about Sybil, I've often heard you say, I think it's a Max Lucado book that talks about outliving your life. And correct me what that phrase really is, but how's that significant to you? And how is that happening now? And how do you even see it beyond your life here on earth?
Yes. Well, one of the things that we can't do, so many people talk about leaving a legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you and I can decide how people are going to think about us. And it means you have to be pretty self-serving.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you gotta, I don't know. It just didn't work for me. And I think there are many people who have desired to do that from the best place in their hearts. But for me, I couldn't make that happen. And I said, what is the only thing I can do? And it really comes out of Psalm 145. All right, one generation tells another generation about the works of God. If I only tell people in their 80s, I'm 80, if I only tell people in their 80s about the love of God, we're all going to die at the same time. It just, I mean, it's pragmatic. And so I'm going to tell the younger generations, and I just happen to like all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't matter to me if it's a 4-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 20-year-old. It doesn't matter, because I know that they are hot from God's hand,
Mm-hmm.
and I am looking to see Christ in them.
Mhm.
And they are encouraging me just by being who they are, even if they're being a little odd or a little off. Uh, they force me to become patient. And
Mhm.
whether I like it or not, they produce the fruit of the Spirit in me. Um, but that to me is the gift of saying, how many relationships are you building in the next generations? So then when you and I pass from this side to the other side, do you know what? Your words are left in a fresh way, a fresh iteration in the lives of others. A new work will be done, but it will be that something has passed in a beautiful way.
Mm, that's beautiful, Sybil. This chapter also talks about how many of us, even as believers, have a fear of death. And how would you respond to somebody who struggles with fearing death?
Well, I think what you just said, Gail, naming it,
Mm.
I am afraid to die. Now, one of the reasons that I'm not afraid to die is my grandmother came to live with us when she was 89, and she lived with us till her death, which was when she was 95. And she was in a wheelchair the last 3 years. She experienced incontinency. Dick took care of her at night. I took care of her during a portion of the day. We had someone who came for help some days during the week. Anybody who came to our home, they had to go and say hello to her. You weren't allowed to call her dearie or honey. You had to call her Mary Lee or Mrs. Montgomery. I said she has a name. And I saw her, the way she leaned in to her latter days. And so I picture myself actually being taken care of in that, because I think some of us are afraid of not being able to take care of ourselves and of the physical disabilities, just natural disabilities of aging. And that's an intimacy. I mean, Dick took care of her every night. She would ring her bell in the middle of the night and he would go up and change her.
Mhm.
And he was the only person that she would allow to take care of her
Mhm.
um, in that way. And he just did it with kindness and tenderness of heart. So I watched that and I said, this is not fearful. And
Mhm.
today, we have so many people who are separated from that experience.
Mhm.
Joan, you grew up on a farm. This was normal.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This,
You did it with
you
animals, you did it with people,
people,
right? And
yes, it was a
you
part
went to
of,
all the funerals too, by the way.
yes, yes, you
Whether
just
you knew
knew
the
that.
person really well or not. Yeah.
And you had a casket that was open.
Mhm.
Yes, you were able, it wasn't, the person didn't disappear on you.
Mhm.
So there was a facing it, and that's something we've been robbed of in these recent generations. Also, Ronald Rolheiser says this: die before you die.
Mhm.
And so, what we talked about, that moving from one room to another, have I really been willing to let go? Have I been willing to let go of the way I used to look at 20 and the way I now look at 40, 50, 60? I mean,
Mhm.
um, I let a different beauty come. And at Bellarmine in Chicago, there is a statue of Mother Teresa. And I've sat on the bench that's right near it and looked at her. And I've looked at her wrinkles. I've looked at her hands. I've looked at her feet. I've looked at her face. And I've said, God, you have redefined beauty.
Mhm.
You have redefined handsomeness. This is real life. This is a body that has lived life, that has touched people. So,
Mhm.
That's
so I just, we're a culture that is focused on being young and it's focused on being adolescent. It's not focused on becoming mature.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Sybil, you make me think too of, and I know all three of us, we've had the honor and privilege of walking someone home, where
Yes.
the veil is very thin. And you described that
Yes.
well. It is now not something I fear. It's actually just a really beautiful privilege to be able to, um, have that journey. It's a birth thing, really, right?
Yes.
It is. It's
Yes.
the Holy
And
Spirit.
yes. And I have a picture, and I may have shown it to you of uh, a formation in the earth, a piece, a rock formation that has a circuit, and it looks to me like the cervix. And it's got some greenery around it. And it was a painting in the office of Sister Olga. And and I took a picture of this, and because it was glass frame, on the opposite wall was a cross. So this picture has this dim cross in it. And I picture myself going through the birth canal of the earth into a space that will be all right. And I think of a baby who is in the womb of a woman. And do you think that baby has any idea what life is going to be like when they come out? Now, here is something that baby knows. They get hints because that baby can hear some noises. That baby can hear some noises. They can feel touch and that. And so I begin to hear some noises of heaven.
Mm.
I begin to hear some noises, and it doesn't make me fearful.
Mm.
They're good noises because I'm surrounded by a cloud of witnesses.
Mhm.
And I've heard heaven sing before, and been told the story that came to the shepherds. So those noises are in me.
Mm.
Mm.
That's beautiful. Really, really helpful too. Um, just a little transition here. The book also talks about, which is why we actually thought about you today, is it talks about saints and heroes of the faith, people that have gone before, I think, to the great cloud of witnesses. And I just thought it would be interesting to ask you, who are those people for you? Who has gone ahead that has taught you and been influential to you? Now, just you're going to have to pick a little tiny handful, Sybil,
Yes, yes.
because I've seen your bookshelf before.
Well, for me, it's people who have gone the long haul.
Mm.
So they're people who have lived life with the end in mind. And so Granny Brand and her family and her son, Paul Brand, who wrote Fearfully and Wonderfully it was written with Philip Yancey, but was in India for 20 years before she experienced her first convert. Okay, that's someone who keeps the end in mind, faithful. Amy Carmichael, who lived 20 years flat on her back due to a back injury and wrote some of the most beautiful poetry and essays at that period of time, that uh, that I say, all right, she did 20 years flat on her back. Huh. I wonder if I could do 20 years flat on my back. And so I think for me, I look for people who understand what suffering is. Nelson Mandela tells me how to live. No, that space of being isolated, and then the long road to freedom. So they're people who stay the course in the midst of adversity.
Mhm.
That's who gets me. That's who I resonate with.
It's good.
And uh, and there are many, many more that we could name and mention. Mother Teresa has spoken to me deeply. Keep the main thing the main thing. That
Mm.
no, loving God, loving others, and loving yourself.
Mhm.
That is it. And setting a table. I think the quote you read at the beginning about servanthood talked about hospitality.
Right.
And hospitality to me is inviting the stranger into the inside circle of intimacy. So it's just making friends for God, with God, to God, no matter where I am. And I'll tell you the picture I have, because you two have heard me speak about this. I picture myself not being able to see, not being able to hear, maybe not even being able to talk. And I will have some caregivers around me. But because I've done the inner work, so that's what I would say to your class: do the inner work of letting go, of forgiving, of dying to the things that you did not get, of letting go of those things that are no longer useful to life. And then coming to this space, your body will continue to communicate the truth of the gospel. So while your nerve endings still work, while your mind still works, let it go. Let it go and learn to love. There is nothing better than that. And it just, yeah, I mean, John, this is my commandment to you: love one another as I have loved you. That is our primary work, period.
Well, I love that. And I feel like we could go on and
And
on here, Sybil.
yeah,
It's been such a beautiful conversation, and just listening. I wish all of you could see our faces, because there's a smile on our faces as we recognize the truth of
yes.
what you have lived and what you are sharing with each one of us, and we have been witness to. I just wonder, Sybil, you have mentioned other people and scriptures as you have spoken. But what I'd like to ask you is, could you, if you had a chance, or you do have a chance right now, to encourage this class of men and women related to this journey towards heaven, what what might you say? Maybe there's one step or a way or one practice, since we do practice, do the spiritual practices a lot in our class and in our lives. What would be that one practice that you think is helpful in making our way, our pilgrimage toward heaven?
Well, I think one I said is do the inner work of releasing those things that and I actually, you can't do this work. You put yourself in a place where God does the work of the wounds and disappointments and difficulties of the early parts of your life. Silence and solitude is a practice that is just absolutely essential in that work. It's the surgery that you open yourself to God doing. So that is an essential practice. The other thing is you have to release what the culture is trying to tell you. Just yeah, and the way I did it, I just bumped into it through the basketball coach, John Wooden. And and you've heard me say this before, but at age 50, John Wooden was still doing things. And someone asked him about his basketball teams, and he said, well, some teams will be better than mine. I can't do anything about that. But this I'll tell you, my teams will play 4 quarters with intensity. And at that moment, when I heard that, I said, that's it. I'm going to live to 100. Now, I have no idea of that. But the idea of retirement at 65 or whatever is cultural. And so I just put it way out there, 100. And then anything beyond that is a bonus. So here I am at 80 in the 4th quarter. I'm only 80% there. I mean, I've got a lot of living to do, but nothing in our culture invites that.
Mhm.
Nothing. And except to put it on yourself. I mean, try to stay young or play bingo or do something else, which is, is just about, I like to play a great game, but don't give that as a mainstay of my life. But that and giving yourself away to others. But listen to what the culture is trying to tell you, and then say, is that the way God speaks? I gave you the way I did that. You may discover another way that you would be able to do that, that helps you live counter culturally, which is kingdom living.
That's
Mhm.
beautiful.
That is absolutely beautiful, and
Mm,
just really sums up so much of what you have said on this audio recording, Sib. Would
yeah.
you do us the honor? I'm sorry, did you have something else you wanted to
No.
say?
Mm-mm.
I have one little funny story though. It makes
Yeah.
me laugh. So, Gail and we called Sybil earlier today and I don't know, she was playing bingo or something and she didn't pick up. And her text back to us simply said, "On my way." And I'm thinking it was like prophetic speaking because we were all like, okay, is she on her way to where? I think it just speaks to what we're talking about. She's
Yes.
on her
Yes.
way, and we're on each of our ways, and they're
Yes.
different. We just had one view into somebody's way,
Yes.
and I'm just kind of giggling,
Yes.
about that. There's that great quote. I don't know who it is, Saint somebody, and Saint Catherine. I'll say, it's all the way to heaven is heaven.
Yes, that's what Rohr gave that. Yeah, I mean, Rohr quoted it. It may have been somebody
Yeah,
else,
it's from some.
but yeah, but we're on heaven all the way to heaven,
Yeah.
or hell all the way to hell. I
Mhm.
mean, and so that begins to tell you what are the kind of walking orders of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the last quote I'll give you is Gwen Thomas, GWYN. The beauty is in the walking. We are betrayed by destinations. So the day of my birth on the other side will happen the day it's to happen.
Mhm.
Until then, I'll take a step at a time.
Yeah.
And so just the blessing I would give you is the blessing of Psalm 103. The Lord bless each of you. May everything that is within you bless his holy name. And can you remember his benefits that he has forgiven all of your sins, that he has healed all of your diseases and diseases. He has redeemed your life from the pit. He has crowned you with steadfast love and mercy, and he has renewed your youth like the eagles. Let yourself begin a day with that. Allow yourself to end a day with that. That is the benefit of belonging to him. Grace and peace to each of you.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Sybil. My heart is so full.
No,
And
I am just busting at the seams, really
yeah.
thinking that
Yeah.
we have been able to share
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
this beautiful person that we are happen to be looking at right now, but you were
Yeah.
listening to, and we're so grateful. Thank you for
Mm,
joining us on on just you didn't have much time to think about this, and that's why we know it's true and genuine, because you didn't
absolutely.
need any time to think
Yes.
about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
living.
We
Yes.
love you.
We love you. Oh, and I love you too. You are dear to my heart.
Uh,
All right.
Thanks again. Goodbye, everybody.
Well, we will be
Oh, homework.
homework. Let me just quickly go and remind you what your homework is, and then we will say goodbye. We know this has gone a little longer, but you're going to agree with us that it was well worth the time. So go ahead and read chapter 12, as we said, Making Our Pilgrimage to Heaven, which is on page 170. And before that, there's Psalm 121. You can listen to the audio meditation. And we're going to encourage you just to spend some time pondering the questions after the psalm on page 169. Maybe do a little journaling around them before you arrive at your small group time, because we're going to suggest you use these questions in your discussion time. Now, if you want to go ahead on your own and do the Finding Our Rhythm at the end of the chapter on page 177, feel free to do that. We've kind of modeled it a little bit here. Find who those heroes or saints that you have been able to be mentored by and sit with that thought for a while, but that's going to be done on your own. Just know that for your group time, you will be discussing the questions after the Psalm 121. So hope you all have a wonderful group, and we will all look forward to seeing each other after that in our big celebration on April 29th.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.